In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to use Microsoft Forms. Now, Microsoft Forms is really useful for capturing data. You can do this for assessment purposes if you're a classroom teacher, or if you want to question members of staff. In fact, this can be used in any place of work. So here's a questionnaire that I have previously created, just so you see the bigger picture, the benefit of having the captured responses. And my questions were very similar in terms of they could all be rated from 1 to 5. There were a couple at the end that were long type responses. Now, once you've created your form, you can also see the responses. You've got the kind of analytics, how many people responded, the average time it took for them to complete the form, and whether the form is still active or not. Furthermore, you can open this in Excel, and again, that's really good for using other analytical tools for sorting and searching and so on. So that's basically the bigger picture of having a form pre-created. You can also copy these forms, so you can use them in different classes, and you could kind of tweak them slightly. So if you need to create a copy of a questionnaire or an assessment document, you can tweak them slightly so they're not exactly the same. But we are starting from scratch here. So in order to have access to Microsoft Forms, which is absolutely free, you do need to have a Microsoft account. If you don't have a Microsoft account, go and create one. You can just open an Outlook account, a Hotmail account, and you will then have access to all of these apps plus more. So ideally, you want to be able to see Microsoft Forms. If you can't, search for it through all apps. If you can see it, take a little tip and open this in a new tab. It always allows you to then keep an eye on emails, for example, and you can kind of switch between the two. We're going to create one from scratch as mentioned. So the first option we need to select is create new quiz. Once you've selected that option, you will be presented with a blank form. You can add additional themes to it just by selecting theme. You can customize your own theme, so if you wanted to import an image, you can do that. I'm just going to create a simple one with a green background for now. You can also add a title to your quiz, so this will be end of term, let's say assessment. You can add your description if you would like to add one, and you can also include images if you wish to as well. And what's really good is this is linked to Bing, so you can directly gather images from a search engine, or you can upload them from OneDrive or from your own device. To begin with, we need to look at the type of tools that we have within Microsoft Forms. So by selecting Add New, we can see the different tools that we have to start asking questions. The first option you have is Choice. What that allows you to do is ask a question. So you could say, who is the best teacher? Probably not a wise question to ask, but as you can see, there's radio buttons here at the moment, which means there is only one correct answer. So Mr. C, and that's going to be the correct answer for now. So I'm going to tick that box. You don't have to, but we can also add a message to go with that question. So for example, I may want to include a short message that says, well done, when that question or the answer has been selected. You can add as many options as you like. Now, if for whatever reason you decide that you need to have multiple responses, you can do that just by selecting this option here. And what that does is it changes the radio buttons to tick boxes, which means you can have more than one correct answer. If it's a question that you must require, so this form can't be submitted until that question has been answered, you can select this option here. Tool number 2 is the text tool. You are able to ask a question and the respondents can answer in two particular ways. So for example, what is the purpose of RAM? You can either have a short answer, which is basically one line, or again, you can turn this switch on, which allows you to answer the question in more detail. So rather than what is the purpose of RAM, explain the purpose of RAM. That would be more relevant for this type of question. You can allocate points for questions that have been answered if you wish to. I'm just going to leave that blank for now. So that's your text tool. With any questions that you have, you can actually create a duplicate as well. So if it's a similar type question, so for example, rather than explain the purpose of RAM, I'm going to change that to ROM. We've then just duplicated a question just by clicking the copy icon there. The next tool we're going to be looking at is the rating tool. You can now rate certain questions. At the minute I've selected 5 levels. You can change this from anywhere from 2 to 10, and you can ask your question, rate your ability to, and then your question, and you can change the stars to numbers as well. What's really useful is you can also include a label. So just by selecting the options in the bottom right hand corner, you can add a label which identifies what 1 represents, so not at all, and plenty of experience. So that just gives a bit of a scale to that type of question there. The next tool we will look at is the date. If you would like respondents to include a particular date to a question, so when did you, and then your question, when the respondent responds to this question, they will have an icon where they can select a specific date. Again, as you can see, I've had all of these as required because I want them all answered before the form is submitted. We're going to be exploring some further tools that Microsoft Forms includes. So to begin with, we're going to select more question types. The first one that you have is a ranking. Now, ranking allows respondents to click and drag their responses. So put this in the correct order. In their correct order, and make sure you have the actual correct order as you enter the results or data or the answers. And when this is delivered to your respondent, this will be shuffled, so then they can actually click and drag these into the correct order. We will be looking at this at the end when we've gone through all of the tools. The next type we have is called the liker. This is great for reading type questions. So if your class has gone through a book, you could ask a statement. So how likely is a character, for example, to do something? How likely is a character to do X, Y, or Z? You can have your options here at the top, and you can include as many statements as necessary. That really does give a nice method for children or learners to respond to. Very useful tool. Next one we're going to be looking at is the Net Promoter Score. Again, this is quite similar to the rating score. We've got, by default, there is already a question that's included. How likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? So as you can see, not at all likely or extremely likely. Of course, you can change the scale as you please. The next tool that we're going to be looking at is the Net Promoter Score. This allows you to ask a question and allows the respondent to choose a scale from 1 to 10. As you can see, we've got a question by default. How likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? Not at all likely at this end of the scale, or extremely likely at the other end of the scale. Now you can change the responses, of course. And finally, as you are completing your questionnaire, you may decide to add different sections. What that does is basically creates a new page. It splits your form up, and this, for example, could be section 2. And again, you can go away and compile your types of questions here. Again, this is really useful just so learners can actually see the split between different question types. Really useful for creating exam type questions. In the next part, we're going to be looking at some of the settings that are included within Microsoft Forms. So again, you have things like moving sections. You're able to add branching, which is really useful, and you can also duplicate sections as well. But let's look at some of these. So for example, if somebody does answer this particular question here, I can set a branch. So by selecting the ellipsis tool, we can add branch. What that enables you to do is actually specify where the next question goes to. So if question 4 has been answered, that means that they qualify to basically go to question 7 or 8, or maybe they go to the end of the form. So it's a good way to control how your respondents move through your form. Now we'll be looking at some of the advanced settings before we go and actually look at this form and how it appears when somebody accesses this from a browser. So when we select settings in the top right hand corner, the first option that you see is options for your quiz and showing results automatically. That basically means if it's turned on, respondents will be able to see their results immediately after they submit their quiz. This I would turn off if you don't wish to give your feedback immediately to children in your class. You can also set who is able to complete your form. So if you've selected anyone can respond, that's basically anyone with the URL, with the link. So be really careful with that, particularly if you don't wish to share the link with somebody outside of your organization. If you only wish to share this with people within your organization, make sure you've selected this radio button option here. I would always recommend selecting record name. That way you know exactly who has responded to your questionnaire. If you only want one response per person, so they don't go back and kind of mess up your results, do select that option too. And again, if you only want to share this with specific people, you will need to specify who they are if you select this particular option here. So when you go to share, you'll only be able to share with certain people. But for now, I'm just going to leave this here so we can only share with people in my organization. So anybody with a link can respond to this. So options for responses. So accept responses, of course we need that ticked. You can have your start date, so you can actually select when the questionnaire can begin. It always rounds it up to the nearest hour. And by default, you're only given 15 minutes. So if there aren't time constraints, just make sure that these are switched off or deselected. If you want your progress bar, so if you've shared this with 10 people and you are waiting for 10 responses, you can select that. If you'd like to customize a message, so when the form has been submitted, the respondent will get a thank you message. You can do that here. Let's just deselect that for now. You can also have particular receipts. So when a questionnaire has been completed, you can actually receive a receipt from the respondent as a notification in your email. And to be totally honest with you, depending on the sort of email system that you use, you're likely to get a notification as an email anyway, whichever are selected. So it really depends on what sort of platform you're using. Now, I know I've gone through that relatively quickly, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into how Microsoft Forms can be used. Now I'd like to share this with people. So to do that, we select the share option. The most simplest way to share this is just by clicking or copying the URL and then just pasting that into a different browser. And as you can see, this is how the form will appear. Before we go into that and have a look at the form that we've just created, you can also share the form using a QR code, which is quite fun, particularly for children. So you can download the image and embed that on a document, maybe in an email, whatever you decide to do. So just by using their phones, they're able to access the form using the QR code. If you are a bit of a website designer, you can also embed your form onto a web page just by copying the embed HTML code and pasting that within your domain. The other thing you can do is share your form with other people. So if you've got another teacher and you'd like to share this template with them, you can do that. What's really good is that it will not impact your questionnaire or your form. So just by creating this unique link, you can share that with somebody else and it's basically their copy. They don't then need to recreate exactly what you've just done. If you do want people to collaborate on the same document with you, you can create another unique URL link And what that will do is it will allow more than one person to actually edit this questionnaire. So be really careful which option you choose if you do decide to share this with other people. The final option to share is you can send this out as an email. Just by clicking that, your default email application will load up and you can send this away to whoever you wish to share with. Now hopefully that gives you an idea how simple it is to share Microsoft Forms with other people. As mentioned, this is absolutely free, so it's a great tool to use, and as also mentioned, you can duplicate your forms individually so you can tweak them for certain classes. Really useful. But let's have a quick look at the actual form that we created. So who is the best teacher? We know who that is. We've got a long type response here that we looked at earlier, so let's just put something in there. The purpose of RAM, it's volatile memory. I won't be answering all of these now. I haven't really explained the purpose there anyway. So we've got the ROM. Let's just put some characters in there because I need all these responses. Rate your ability to. You've got your radio buttons. When did you see? Remember, we've got the calendar icon there. You can then select a date. Put these in the correct order. As you can see, these have been shuffled. So we need to put A to the top, C to the bottom. That's great. How likely is A? These were the other options you had. And remember, when you've got radio buttons, you can only ever select one option. How likely are you to recommend us to a friend or a colleague? Extremely likely. Let's go to the next page. And that was section 2. We showed you how to split the form as well. And then we can finally submit. And now I've submitted that, I would have got a thank you message in my inbox had I ticked that box. I hope this has been of some use. Please do feel free to subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, hit the notification button, and ask any questions that you may have. Thank you.